people, because this is a sad reality. Hurt people, and the only way you're going to get better is if you acknowledge that you're hurt, and that's what you do.
The thing that I want to say that you made me think of is that there's such a polarization and such like a repelling thing going on in dating, and the way to break it, whether you're a man or a woman, is to lead with vulnerability.
Oh,
right?
right. Authenticity.
Yes. Where it's like, just, hey, I want to try. And like kind of what you're saying about like, the emotional intelligence that you highlighted is really great. And it's great if guys can like, read that, but it's also okay just to try. And maybe you didn't read it correctly. You got it wrong. And she's mad. And it's okay just to be vulnerable and be like, I'm sorry, I thought you were cute. I just wanted to talk to you.
Yeah.
And if she doesn't take that as a compliment, like, you didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah. I agree. I'll tell you, I don't know if anyone's listening to this, I'll tell you one of the things that I did early on, because when I first got into the dating market, I was terrified, because I was terrified at how absolutely aggressive women were and how fast things moved physically. I was like, whoa, like I'd never seen anything like that before. And so, like, to calm myself down, all I did is I got to know the bartenders and the wait staff, and I just would keep going into the same place. I picked two so it didn't get old. And and what I found is as the wait staff got comfortable with me, some of the other regulars got comfortable with me, and it kind of had this positive validation for when I spoke to people, and it put a lot of people at ease, because the bartender goes, oh, we know Doug is in here all the time. He's a really good guy. Right? And that helped enormously, but it also helped my confidence, because I felt like I had a team on my side, so that like the person wouldn't think that I was a creeper, right? Or that I was a bad person. And it just gave me a sense of comfortability, because if you're not comfortable, you're going to come across as a creeper, right? And that's sad, but it's how it works, right?
I love that you had that whole kind of solution, or that you found that and you kind of created that. Anyway, that's just another golden nugget. Now, what it made me think of, it's so true what you highlight. And I used to think it was just women, but it's not just women anymore. People have this idea that like the other gender is like dangerous. And I think what's happening is like, a lot of people, it's both, people have this idea of like, whether it's like watching the news or maybe watching too many like horror shows of like, these people, whatever, a horror person, right? Where they really expect that like most people are serial killers. And I think that's so unhealthy. And we've got to stop giving like these murder shows or podcasts or whatever you're ingesting so much power, because like, really the reality is, at the end of the day, like I dare the people listening to this podcast to talk to like 5 random people about something genuine. And that will prove to you that it's like, wow, there's a lot of people who are actually like not serial killers, right? But like, because we're functioning from this irrational thing that's in our brains that we see. And it's not even just the murder shows. It's like on the news, watching like, oh, another person got stabbed and shot and murdered. And it's creating like this idea that like everyone's dangerous. And it's like, oh my God, we have to consciously like walk away from that.
I want to take that one step further, because I think that there's a big part that we're both not talking about yet. And this applies to men as well as women, because men are bad with this now too, is that our friends will magnify any concern we have about someone we're with, whether we're married or dating or just met somebody, and they will completely poison us. And again, this goes back to our early conversation. It's really important, who you surround yourself with, and you should be around positive people. And if your friends are always being like, watch out, he's a serial killer, or I'm going to whip open his Facebook, go, oh, he voted for so-and-so. Oh, he must be a racist, or he must be whatever. Stay away from toxic people. If you have toxic friends in your life, man, you have to remove them by any means necessary. I mean, I found since I've removed the toxic people in my life, my level of success has skyrocketed across the board.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Okay. So I hear you on the boundaries and how it's like, cutting out toxic people, but I would be curious to know your opinion on like, how do you handle a situation, or maybe it's a relationship where there's somebody who's not maybe totally toxic. Okay, let's say they're not toxic, but it's like they just have some thoughts or ideas that are toxic, right? Where they just have a bad experience with dating and relationships. And overall a good person or a good guy, but just in that area of your life, they're not the right person to talk to. How do you handle that?
Oh, such a good question, right? Because we all have that. We all have that, right? We do that. I do it. I'll see one of my friends going through a thing and I'll get triggered and I'll go, oh no, what happened to me? You know what happened to me? And so I think, first of all, everyone does it to a certain level. And I would say that that's about boundaries, right? You have to say, hey, look, I know that you're concerned, but I like this for me. And I'm just worried that your experience is going to color mine. And if they're not a toxic person, they might be a little hurt anyways, but if they're not a toxic person, they're not going to run from your life screaming bloody murder. They're going to be like, oh man, I'm so sorry. Actually, if they're healthy, they're like, you know what? I'm so sorry. I don't mean to get my stuff all over you. That's what a healthy person does. So you didn't deserve that. That's what a healthy person does, right? And those people are really rare. I think a lot of times we're afraid to set, and this is true for me, I think we're afraid to set those boundaries because we're afraid to hurt other people. Right. But those, again, this is where that agony comes in right there. There it is. There's that moment where you have to do a thing you don't want to do, but you know you should do it. And if you can just, and this is what I'm finding for me, is if you can just push through, if you can just articulate it, and it's not going to be perfect the first time, you're going to screw up. It's okay. You can apologize for that. But you say, hey, look, I know you had a rough marriage and your experience with your husband or your boyfriend or whomever was toxic and horrible. But this isn't that. I'm just being a little nervous because I just met this person, for example. Right. And I think that helps, because when you start doing that with other people in your life, it gives them permission to do it with you. So it forces growth both ways. Right. By the way, I'm not a coach. I'm not a licensed therapist. Talk to a coach or a therapist before you take my advice, people.
But you're being vulnerable, and that goes a long, long way. And some people need to see that and hear that and then trust them. Like anyone who's listening to this, like everyone, they are their own authority in life. But it really makes a difference to have a kind of vision, because it is really the Wild West out there with dating, with everything we've talked about. But just for you to, it's like, you're not putting your opinion on anybody. Like, just like we talked about with like really reactive opinions and conversations earlier here, it's like you're just sharing like your truth. This is just what you do. This is how you would handle it. And that's cool. That's okay. You're not putting that on anyone else. If anything, it's just an offer, it's an invitation, but where they get to then consider, like, what do they think?
Right. Okay. I feel you. I just feel the need to let people know that this is where I am in my life, in my own personal evolution. And I am not perfect. I still make those mistakes all the time. I get triggered all the time. I've come out of some pretty toxic relationships that have been very traumatizing, and I will find myself tripped. But it's necessary, because how am I going to heal if I can't admit what my behavior was to myself, let alone the other people? Because this is a sad reality. Hurt people. And the only way you're going to get better is if you acknowledge that you're hurt. And that's what you do. So this is just where I am in my personal evolution. Right. And so, and when I say dumpster fire, I mean, like blazing dumpster fire is my life. Right. And I just notice that I'm on fire. I put it out. I apologize and move on. And that's all you can do, and hope that you do a little bit better the next time around. Right.
Oh, totally. But you know what, Doug, you could give yourself way more credit for where you're at.
Tongue in cheek. I like to be funny about it, so I can deal with it, because it gets, if you're, I'll tell you, this is why it's agony. If you're doing your personal growth day in and day out, it's like you can't focus on it 24/7, because if you're really doing it, you're looking at, all right, these are the problems in my life. I'm responsible for these problems. This is what caused these problems. It can get pretty depressing because all you're doing is reliving that trauma. So you have to have some humor in it, right? I'm not shaming myself. I'm literally releasing the shame by having humor. You know what I mean? And I think that's critical.
And humor, okay, because we didn't talk about this yet, but I love that, like, you're just being honest and sharing this, because the reason why people don't feel their emotions is because they're afraid to get stuck in anger. Like, they're afraid to get stuck in depression and shame and all that stuff that you just said. But what happens is, like, So let's say you have shame, and shame is a +7, and then you've got like humor, and humor is okay. So shame -7, humor +4. If you have shame and you try to be funny, like shame is heavier, so you'll still have a -3. Now, I'm not saying don't be humorous. Be humorous, because it's important to, like, as you're going through personal transformation, to bring in what's called levity, to make light, and just to, not be stuck in it, right? So, but there's a way of doing that where eventually, like, shame is not here to stay, right? Where it's like you'll eventually process these experiences, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And then what will happen is then you'll be able to really feel and have space and room to have more humor, to have more joy, to have more enthusiasm, right? And that's ultimately what happens. And then so you can choose to either release emotions or to amplify emotions, and you have joy, like you have humor. And it sounds like, just from talking to you, like, yeah, humor is a really a strong point in you, and a strength that actually pulls you out of, like, a lot of potentially negative situations, which I love and continue to do. But recognize that at the same time, that we actually have a lot more ability to move up and down, like these scales.
I completely agree. I like that you put it that way. You're right. You need to find something, and hopefully it's not food, right? Because if you find food to
Oh yeah.
negativity, you're going to end up in more negativity. Yeah, it's I find that humor is for me, the ultimate saving grace for everything, right? Because it's such a good release. A good belly laugh is a good release, you know?
Yeah, and it's funny because, like, I don't have this totally, like, all mapped out yet, but so, like, for example, it came up before, like, the opposite of vengeance is forgiveness, and you can kind of, let's say that, like, shame or anger is an illness, right? It's not, but, like, okay, so that's more of like this sick stuff, right? But if you practice having forgiveness, like, that will cure the vengeance, right? And humor, it's like, I don't really know what that correlates to, but humor is a sort of medicine. Now, it's not like that other thing will still be there. It needs to be released, because otherwise then that's toxic positivity.
Right. Yeah, yes. Thank you for saying that.
Right. And that's where it's important, like, what you do so well and so beautifully and you're so committed to, is the personal development work that's necessary to, like, release those things, no matter how long it takes. And it's like an onion, where you might think it's, oh, I've got it, and then something happens and you're like, oh, there's more there. But there will be a bottom at some point and someday for you, and that's for everybody listening to this stuff, is like, there will eventually be a bottom, or you will eventually develop so much resilience that when you encounter shame, or you encounter, like, this anger or whatever, you'll know how to handle it and manage it better, because you did the hard stuff already. Where anything else that triggers you to be angry, it won't be as intense, because you're like, oh, I know what that's like. Oh, I remember what I did. Okay. And it goes like a sabotage cycle. It leaves more quickly, and then you can more quickly bring in the humor or the enthusiasm.
Right. Right. Yeah. That, which reminds me of something that you said earlier. We were talking about relationships and attracting narcissistic personalities, and getting over, changing the chemicals within our bodies, so that we know when that person comes to us, we're just repelled. Because that's definitely something that I struggle with. And I think that for most people, if as human beings we can just see what it is we're putting out, because we are attracting them. We literally, and I'm not talking in a metaphysical way, like, they see us in our body language, and our facial expressions are saying a lot more than our words. And I swear to God, we're just magnets for the toxicity that we haven't dealt with.
Interesting. Hold on, clarify. We are magnet. Okay, we are magnets for the toxicity that we didn't deal with, or we haven't dealt with.
Correct.
Okay. I'm processing that. Okay.
Sorry, my brain works in mysterious ways. It's very fast.
No, that's excellent. No, no, no. You're great. Oh my God. No, you explained it very clearly. But it's so deep. I want to make sure that beyond, like, the cognitive, I really understand what you're saying, because that's something that needs to be, like, understood on that deeper level. So now, to get back to you though, I think what it is we unconsciously like manifest or attract, not that we're toxic, right? We want to be very careful. It's just we're still playing out these old patterns that we're unconscious to. And so that's where it's like we're doing this dance and we're finding people to fill the role because it feels certainty is more comfortable than like what actually feels good at that point. So eventually through like becoming more self-aware and through like releasing, like you'll be able to release those patterns, and what will happen is then you'll be strong enough to identify someone like this woman and you'll be like, oh, this dance is not what I'm used to, but actually it feels better. And like what you're experiencing now, I would actually very consciously, like when you're having a good moment, like, God, when you're out together and you have that kiss, like feel it, right? Like, and let it feel good because it's like that will replace like those other bad experiences and kind of help you move up your scale. And whether it works out or not with her, like long term, then you'll have those experiences to say, wow, I felt good before. That's evidence. That's proof that like I can be in a loving, healthy, romantic relationship with a woman.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. We are coming on an hour and a half. We'll definitely have to have you on again. So why don't you leave us off with a piece of advice for all of our viewers, something that they could do to improve their lives, maybe something small, maybe something big, whatever comes to mind that may help them improve their life. And then for those of you listening, after she signs off, I'm going to have all of Danielle's information below in the links, so you can reach out to her. We'll get her email, we'll get her website, so you can reach out and ask her questions. So go ahead. Why don't you give that last little piece of advice?
Yeah, absolutely. So like for anyone who's listening today, the techniques that you can use to improve your emotional intelligence are vast, and you get to play with what's going to work for you. So you can do something called the emotional freedom technique, which is tapping, where you tap on various areas of your body. And there's phrases that you can find online that help you to release and accept certain emotions in that way. You can do simple things like journal, you can dance, ideally things that take you out of your brain and into your body, right? Because writing and journaling is not necessarily a cognitive thing. It's like you have pen to paper and it's a very tangible experience. When you're listening to music, it moves you. And you can even dance to music, right? If that feels right to you. But my favorite thing is, like I shared before, brave acceptance, which is a 4-part process where, ideally, if you're someone who meditates, you can add this onto your mindfulness or meditation practice, which is where instead of just quieting your mind and listening to your thoughts, and you can actually quiet your mind, go into your body and feel your feelings, which starts by noticing your sensations. So that's step 1. Then step 2 is when you feel something tangible, let's say on a scale of 1 to 10 of like, oh, I have a really intense feeling in my gut, in my belly. What is that? Identify what emotion it is. Oh my God, I feel dread. I feel anger. And allow yourself to feel that. You can put it on a scale of 1 to 10. Maybe it's really heavy, like a 9. Maybe it's not so strong, like a 2. And just allow yourself to feel it until it's a 0, until it's no charge. And what will happen is then you'll experience the third thing, which is clarity, right? Which is where then you're like, oh, that's the truth about that situation, or that's why I felt that, right? And then that will lead you to a 4th step, which is self-acceptance.
I like it. All right, Danielle, thank you for being with us today. We're definitely going to have you again. Really appreciate you.
Likewise, Doug, this was so fun. What a blast.